The staff at Bellamy's watched him enter with barely concealed disdain, their eyes tracking his movements like security cameras. Marcus Holloway adjusted his worn leather jacket, feeling their stares burn into his skin as he approached the hostess stand. The restaurant hummed with the gentle clink of expensive silverware and the murmur of privileged conversation, the kind of place where the menu had no prices, because if you needed to ask, you couldn't afford it. "Good evening," Marcus said, his voice measured and calm despite the tension crackling in the air. "I have a reservation for 8 o'clock. The hostess, a slender woman with platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, didn't bother looking at her computer. Her eyes, cold and assessing, swept over Marcus's casual attire, jeans, boots, and the leather jacket that had seen better days. "I'm afraid all our tables are reserved for the evening," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression remaining neutral even as his jaw tightened. "As I mentioned, I have a reservation. The name is Holloway." The hostess pursed her lips, making a show of checking her system. The hesitation was deliberate, designed to make him feel unwelcome. Behind her, Marcus caught the eye of a server who quickly looked away, exchanging a glance with a colleague. "I don't see a reservation under that name," she finally said, not bothering to hide her relief. "Are you sure you have the right restaurant?" Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to the confirmation email. "Bellamy's, 8 p.m., party of 1. The reservation was confirmed yesterday." The hostess's smile didn't reach her eyes. "There must have been a mistake. We're fully booked tonight." She gestured vaguely toward the door. "The bistro across the street might have availability." Marcus glanced around the dining room, noting at least 3 empty tables. He'd dealt with this before, the sudden loss of reservations, the convenient mistakes in the system. But tonight wasn't about making a scene. He had other plans. "Perhaps you could check again," he suggested, his voice low but firm. "I'd hate to think my reservation was deliberately overlooked." The implication hung in the air. The hostess's cheeks flushed, and she turned back to her computer, typing with unnecessary force. A man in an impeccably tailored suit approached, his expression a practiced blend of concern and authority, the restaurant manager sensing potential trouble. "Is there a problem, Jessica?" he asked, his eyes darting between the hostess and Marcus. "This gentleman claims to have a reservation, but I can't find it in our system," she explained, the slight emphasis on gentleman not lost on Marcus. The manager turned to face him fully, his smile professional but cold. "I'm Richard Gaines, the general manager. I apologize for any confusion, but we are fully committed this evening. Perhaps we could accommodate you another night. We'd be happy to take your information for a future reservation." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I made this reservation 2 weeks ago, Mr. Gaines. I received a confirmation email yesterday. I understand your establishment is selective about its clientele, but I assure you my reservation is legitimate." Gaines's smile tightened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, sir, but Bellamy's welcomes all guests. If there was a reservation, it would be in our system." A few nearby diners were watching now, their conversations dimming as they observed the exchange. Marcus could feel the weight of their stares, the silent judgment, the assumptions forming in their minds. This wasn't just about a dinner reservation. It was about belonging, about who got to occupy certain spaces without question. "Perhaps," Marcus said, his voice even, "you could check under Williams. My assistant may have used that name." Gaines nodded stiffly, motioning for the hostess to check. She typed again, then paused, her expression shifting. "There is a Williams reservation for 8 p.m., she admitted reluctantly. "That would be mine," Marcus confirmed. Gaines hesitated, clearly weighing his options. The reservation existed, but seating Marcus meant acknowledging their mistake, or worse, their bias. The dining room had grown quieter, the audience expanding as more patrons sensed the tension unfolding. "Very well," Gaines finally said, his tone making it clear this was a concession rather than a welcome. "Jessica will show you to your table." The hostess grabbed a single menu, her movement stiff as she stepped out from behind her stand. "Follow me, please." She led Marcus through the dining room, past tables of patrons who didn't bother to hide their stares. Some whispered behind manicured hands, others simply watched with undisguised curiosity or disapproval. Marcus kept his eyes forward, his posture relaxed but dignified. He'd been in rooms like this before, rooms where his presence was seen as an intrusion, where his right to exist in certain spaces was questioned before he even spoke. The table she brought him to was near the kitchen, tucked away in a corner where he'd be least visible to other diners. It was the table they reserved for people they hoped wouldn't return. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said, placing the menu on the table before quickly retreating. Marcus took his seat, surveying the restaurant from his isolated position. He didn't immediately open the menu. Instead, he removed his worn leather jacket, revealing a crisp white dress shirt underneath. He folded the jacket carefully and placed it on the empty chair beside him, then adjusted his cuffs. Silver cufflinks catching the light, subtle but unmistakably expensive. It took nearly 15 minutes before a server approached his table, a young man with a forced smile who seemed to have drawn the short straw. "Good evening, sir. My name is Alex. I'll be taking care of you tonight." His tone suggested the opposite, that taking care of Marcus was the last thing he wanted to do. "Good evening, Alex," Marcus replied, his voice warm, as if he hadn't noticed the delay or the barely concealed reluctance. "I'll have a glass of water to start." "Of course." Alex disappeared, returning moments later with water that he placed on the table without meeting Marcus's eyes. "Are you ready to order, or do you need more time?" "I haven't seen a wine list," Marcus pointed out. Alex blinked as if surprised by the request. "Right, I'll bring that right away." When the wine list arrived, Marcus studied it carefully, aware that Alex was hovering, expecting a quick, uninformed selection. Instead, Marcus took his time, his finger trailing down the extensive collection before stopping at a particular vintage. "I'll have a glass of the 2015 Chateau Margaux," he said, naming one of the most expensive wines by the glass on the menu. Alex's eyebrows rose slightly. "Excellent choice, sir. And to eat?" "I'll start with the seared scallops, followed by the dry-aged ribeye, medium rare." As Alex walked away, Marcus noticed the shift in the server's demeanor, a subtle recalibration based on Marcus's obvious familiarity with fine dining. It wasn't respect yet, but it was reassessment, the first crack in their assumptions. The wine arrived, and Alex performed the tasting ritual with more attention than before. Marcus swirled the deep red liquid, inhaled its bouquet, and took a small sip, nodding his approval. "Perfect, thank you." As the evening progressed, the service improved marginally. The scallops arrived promptly, followed by the perfectly cooked steak. Marcus ate unhurriedly, savoring each bite, occasionally glancing around the restaurant. He noticed Gaines watching him from near the bar, his expression a mix of curiosity and lingering suspicion. When Alex returned to clear his plate, Marcus requested the dessert menu. "And I'd like to speak with the chef, if possible." Alex hesitated. "The chef is quite busy, sir. Perhaps the manager—" "I understand," Marcus interjected smoothly. "But please let Chef Ramsay know that Marcus Holloway would like to compliment him personally on the ribeye. It was exceptional." Something in Marcus's tone made Alex pause. "You, know Chef Ramsay?" "We've crossed paths," Marcus replied simply. Alex retreated to the kitchen, and within minutes, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The head chef, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority, emerged from the kitchen. His whites were immaculate, his expression curious as he scanned the dining room. When his eyes landed on Marcus, recognition dawned immediately. The chef's face transformed, breaking into a genuine smile as he strode purposefully across the restaurant. "Marcus Holloway," he called out, his booming voice drawing every eye in the place. "You magnificent bastard, why didn't you tell me you were coming?" Marcus stood, accepting the chef's enthusiastic handshake and the subsequent bear hug that followed. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as one of the most celebrated chefs in the country embraced the man they had collectively dismissed. "I wanted to experience Bellamy's as a regular customer," Marcus explained, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby tables. Chef Ramsay laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Regular? There's nothing regular about you, my friend." He turned to address the now captivated dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of hosting Marcus Holloway tonight, though apparently we nearly turned him away." The murmurs began immediately, rippling through the restaurant like a wave. Diners leaned toward each other, whispering urgently, many pulling out their phones to search the name. Gaines had gone pale, rooted to his spot by the bar. "For those who don't know," Chef Ramsay continued, clearly enjoying the moment, "Marcus is only the most influential food critic and restaurant investor on the West Coast. His review can make or break an establishment, and his investment can turn a good restaurant into a great one." The silence that followed was deafening. And just like that, the dynamic shifted completely. The corner table by the kitchen suddenly became the center of the restaurant, and Marcus Holloway, the man they had tried to turn away, was revealed to be someone they should have been desperate to please. Gaines pushed through the stunned silence, making his way toward Marcus's table with the urgency of a man whose career was suddenly balanced on a knife's edge. His earlier coldness had melted into a desperate warmth, his smile now stretched painfully wide across his face. "Mr. Holloway," he said, extending his hand, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for the misunderstanding earlier. Had you known who I was," Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm, "you would have treated me differently. That's precisely the problem, isn't it, Mr. Gaines?" The manager's smile faltered. Around them, the restaurant remained unusually quiet, diners straining to catch every word of the exchange. Chef Ramsay stood beside Marcus, arms crossed, his usual joviality replaced with a stoic expression that suggested he understood exactly what had happened before he'd emerged from the kitchen. "I assure you, there was simply a confusion with the reservation system," Gaines insisted, his voice dropping to a nervous whisper. "We would never intentionally—" "3 empty tables," Marcus said quietly, nodding toward the dining room. "I counted them when I arrived, yet I was told you were fully booked." He took a sip of his wine, letting the moment stretch uncomfortably. "Interesting, isn't it, how systems only seem to malfunction for certain people?" Chef Ramsay's jaw tightened as he turned to Gaines. "Richard, I think we need to have a serious conversation about Bellamy's reservation policies. Tomorrow morning, my office." The manager nodded stiffly, sweat beading at his temples despite the restaurant's carefully controlled temperature. "Of course, Chef. Mr. Holloway, please allow us to comp your meal this evening as a small gesture of—" "That won't be necessary," Marcus cut in. "I'm not interested in special treatment now any more than I was when I arrived. What I would appreciate is the dessert menu I requested earlier." Gaines snapped his fingers and Alex appeared instantly, dessert menu in hand, his earlier reluctance transformed into eager attentiveness. "Our pastry chef has prepared a special chocolate soufflé tonight," he said, his voice nearly trembling with newfound respect. "It's not on the menu, but I'd be happy to recommend it." "The soufflé sounds perfect," Marcus replied, his easy confidence unchanged despite the dramatic shift in how he was being treated. As Gaines and Alex retreated, Chef Ramsay pulled out a chair and sat across from Marcus. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," he said, his voice low enough that only Marcus could hear. "You could have called, told me you were coming." Marcus smiled slightly. "And miss this educational experience?" "Not a chance." Ramsay shook his head, but there was understanding in his eyes. "How many restaurants have you visited like this?" "Enough to know this isn't an isolated incident," Marcus replied, his expression darkening momentarily. "Too many to pretend it's just a few bad apples." The chef sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I hired Gaines for his experience, his pedigree. Never saw this side of him during the interview process." "You wouldn't have," Marcus said. "Men like Gaines are chameleons. They show different colors to different people." He glanced around the dining room, where patrons were now trying to appear disinterested while stealing glances at his table. "But tonight isn't about Gaines. It's about something bigger." Ramsay nodded slowly. "Your new project, the exposé." "Don't look so worried," Marcus said with a small smile. "Bellamy's isn't my target. You're too talented for that. But this experience will certainly feature in the piece." "Fair enough," Ramsay conceded. "Just don't burn the place down completely. I've got 3 sous chefs with families to feed." Marcus's soufflé arrived, presented with flourish by Alex, who seemed determined to erase his earlier behavior through sheer enthusiasm. "Chef's special, sir. Made with Valrhona chocolate and a touch of Madagascar vanilla." "It looks spectacular," Marcus acknowledged, noting the perfect rise of the delicate dessert. As he took his first bite, he was aware of the eyes still watching him, some curious, some anxious, some recalibrating their assessment of the man they'd dismissed hours earlier. The soufflé was indeed exceptional, light yet intensely flavorful. Marcus savored it slowly, allowing the rich chocolate to melt on his tongue. "So," Ramsay said after a comfortable silence, "are you going to tell me about your meeting with the publisher tomorrow, or do I have to read about it in the trades like everyone else?" Marcus chuckled. "Still have your ear to the ground, I see." "This is a small industry at the top," Ramsay replied with a shrug. "Word gets around when Marcus Holloway is about to release a new book." "It's not just a book this time," Marcus said, his expression turning serious. "It's a movement, a reckoning for the culinary world." Before he could elaborate, a young couple approached the table tentatively. The woman, dressed in an elegant black dress, clutched her purse nervously, while her companion, equally well-dressed, seemed to be gathering his courage. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice hesitant. "You're Marcus Holloway, right? The Marcus Holloway who wrote Flavors of Resistance?" Marcus nodded, setting down his spoon. "I am." The woman stepped forward. "Your book changed my life. The way you connected food with identity, with history. It gave me the courage to open my own restaurant. We serve dishes inspired by my grandmother's Jamaican recipes." She pulled out a business card, offering it with a slightly trembling hand. "We're small, nothing like this place. But if you ever wanted to visit..." Marcus took the card, reading the restaurant's name, Roots and Soul. He smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. "I'd be honored. What's your name?" "Amara," she said, her face lighting up. "Amara Jenkins." "Well, Amara Jenkins, expect me soon," Marcus promised, tucking the card into his pocket. "I'm always searching for authentic stories told through food." As the couple retreated, visibly thrilled, Ramsay raised an eyebrow. "You'll actually go?" "Of course," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Places like Roots and Soul are the heart of what I do. Not just the Michelins and the James Beard winners." He gestured around the elegant dining room. Bellamy's is exceptional, but it's also exclusionary. My work has always been about democratizing fine dining, about challenging who gets to define what good food means. Ramsey nodded thoughtfully. And your new project continues that mission? It expands it, Marcus corrected. This time I'm pulling back the curtain on the entire industry, showing not just what happens in the dining room, but in the kitchens, the corporate offices, the investment meetings, all the places where decisions are made about who belongs and who doesn't. Their conversation was interrupted as the maitre d' approached, a phone in hand. Mr. Holloway, I apologize for the interruption, but there's a call for you from Mr. Landon at Epicurean Publishing. He says it's urgent. Marcus frowned. James Landon, his publisher, knew he was dining at Bellamy's tonight. It was part of the research for the final chapter of his book. For him to call during dinner meant something significant had happened. I'll take it, Marcus said, accepting the phone. James, what's going on? As Marcus listened to the voice on the other end, his expression changed, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face, surprise, concern, and finally, a steely determination. Are you certain? He asked after a long moment. And you verified the source? Another pause. I see. No, don't do anything until I get there. I'll be at the office in 30 minutes. He handed the phone back to the maitre d' and then turned to Ramsey. I need to go. Something's come up with the book. Ramsey's brow furrowed. Trouble? Let's just say the stakes have been raised, Marcus replied, already signaling for his check. Remember Xavier Laurent? Ramsey's eyes widened. The restaurant group CEO? The one who's been buying up every independent spot in the city? The very same, Marcus confirmed. Apparently he's gotten wind of my book and is attempting to pressure Epicurean to kill it. He's threatening a lawsuit and worse. Worse? Marcus's expression darkened. According to James, Laurent has made some calls, leveraged some connections. He's trying to discredit me before the book even hits shelves. Alex appeared with the check, placing it discreetly on the table. Marcus pulled out his credit card without even glancing at the total, handing both to the server. What are you going to do? Ramsey asked, concern evident in his voice. Exactly what Laurent fears most, Marcus said, a determined glint in his eye. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. And now I'm adding a chapter specifically about him. As Alex returned with the receipt, Marcus signed it with a generous tip, the kind that made the server's eyes widen in surprise. Standing, he retrieved his leather jacket and slipped it on with practiced ease. Thank you for the meal, he said to Ramsey. The steak was perfect, the soufflé divine. You haven't lost your touch. Ramsey stood as well, clasping Marcus's hand firmly. Be careful, my friend. Men like Laurent don't play fair. Neither do I, Marcus replied with a grim smile. Not anymore. As Marcus made his way toward the exit, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted again. Diners who had previously ignored or dismissed him now watched with undisguised interest, many nudging their companions and whispering behind hands. The same hostess who had tried to turn him away now rushed to open the door, her smile painfully forced. Thank you for dining with us, Mr. Holloway, she said, her voice honey-sweet. We hope to see you again soon. Marcus paused at the threshold, turning to face her directly. I'm sure you do, he said quietly. But the question is, would you have hoped to see me again if Chef Ramsey hadn't recognized me? If I'd just been another black man in a leather jacket? The hostess's smile froze, her face flushing with embarrassment. That's what I thought, Marcus said, his voice calm but caring enough to be heard by those nearby. Something to think about, Jessica. He stepped out into the cool night air, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. The valet rushed to retrieve his car, suddenly attentive in a way he hadn't been upon Marcus's arrival. As he waited, Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for, Elise Chen, his former research assistant and current food editor at the Tribune. He hit dial. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, I thought you were having dinner at Bellamy's tonight." "I was," he replied, watching as the valet pulled up in his sleek black Tesla. "But something's come up. How quickly can you meet me at Epicurean's offices?" 20 minutes, she said without hesitation. "What's happening?" Marcus took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. "War, Elise. The war I've been preparing for my entire career." As he slid into the driver's seat, Marcus caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror. The face that looked back at him wasn't just that of a celebrated food critic or a successful author. It was the face of a man who had spent a lifetime being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, and who had turned that experience into a weapon. Tonight at Bellamy's was just the beginning. The real battle was about to begin. The Epicurean publishing offices occupied the top floor of a sleek high-rise in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of building that seemed to be made entirely of glass and ambition. At this hour, just past 10 p.m., most of the building was dark, but the lights on the 35th floor burned bright, visible from the street below like a lighthouse guiding Marcus through the night. As the elevator ascended, Marcus used the momentary solitude to center himself. He'd expected resistance to his book, had prepared for it even, but Laurent's direct intervention suggested he'd hit a nerve more sensitive than anticipated. The restaurant mogul controlled over 60 high-end establishments across the country, each one more exclusive than the last. His empire was built on a foundation of prestige and inaccessibility, the very antithesis of what Marcus had spent his career fighting against. The elevator doors slid open to reveal James Landon pacing in the reception area. In his mid-50s, with silver hair and tortoiseshell glasses that gave him the appearance of an academic rather than a publishing executive, Landon had been Marcus's champion since his first manuscript had landed on his desk 7 years ago. "There you are," Landon said, relief evident in his voice. "Elise called to say she's parking now." Marcus nodded, following Landon through the glass doors that led to the executive suite. "Tell me exactly what happened." Landon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Laurent called me directly about 2 hours ago. Said he'd heard rumors about the content of your book, specifically the chapter on discriminatory practices in upscale dining." "And how would he know what's in my manuscript?" Marcus asked, his tone deceptively casual. "We've kept it under strict embargo." "That's what I'd like to know," Landon replied, his expression grim. "The only copies outside our secure server are yours, mine, and the one we sent to legal last week." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Someone in legal, then?" "Possibly," Landon admitted. "Or someone hacked our server. Either way, Laurent knows enough to be scared. And when men like him get scared, they get dangerous." They entered Landon's corner office, a space that reflected its occupant. Tasteful, understated, but with surprising touches that revealed a more complex character beneath the surface. A vintage record player in one corner, framed album covers on the walls instead of the expected literary awards. "What exactly did he threaten?" Marcus asked, settling into one of the leather chairs across from Landon's desk. Landon moved to a sideboard, pouring 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler. First, the usual legal saber rattling. Defamation, libel, the whole 9 yards. He handed the glass to Marcus. Then it got personal. "He mentioned things from your past, Marcus. Things that weren't public knowledge." Marcus accepted the drink but didn't immediately take a sip. "What things?" "Your time at Le Bernardin, the incident with Chef Michaels." Marcus went very still. The incident, as Landon so delicately put it, had occurred 12 years ago when Marcus was a promising young sous chef at one of New York's most prestigious restaurants. After enduring months of racist comments and being passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified white colleagues, Marcus had filed a formal complaint. Instead of addressing the discrimination, the restaurant had fired him, and Chef Michaels had ensured he was blacklisted from every top kitchen in the city. It was this experience that had propelled Marcus away from the kitchen and toward food criticism and writing, a path that ultimately proved far more influential than remaining a chef. "That was a sealed settlement," Marcus said quietly. "The terms were confidential." "Exactly," Landon replied, his expression grave. "Which means someone with serious resources has been digging into your past." The door to the office opened, and Elise Chen entered, slightly breathless from rushing. At 32, Elise had the sharp intelligence and relentless work ethic that had taken her from Marcus's research assistant to a respected food editor in just 5 years. Her tailored blazer over jeans suggested she'd come from somewhere casual, but had grabbed something more professional on her way out. "Sorry, traffic was a nightmare," she said, dropping her bag on an empty chair. "What's this about Laurent trying to kill the book?" Marcus gestured for her to sit. "He knows about the chapter on exclusionary practices. He's threatening legal action." "We expected that," Elise said with a dismissive wave. "Our legal team vetted every line. Everything's sourced. Everything's fact-checked." She paused, glancing between Marcus and Landon. "So what's really going on?" Landon sighed. "Laurent also knows about Marcus's history with Chef Michaels, information that was part of a sealed settlement." Elise's expression darkened. "That's not public record. There's no way he should have access to that. Unless he has connections in the legal system," Marcus said, finally taking a sip of his scotch. "Or unless Michaels violated the agreement and told him directly." "Which means?" Elise prompted, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Which means," Marcus replied, "that Laurent sees me as enough of a threat to pull out all the stops. He's not just trying to kill the book, he's trying to discredit me personally." The three sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around them. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Los Angeles skyline sparkled, a constellation of lights stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere in that glittering landscape, Xavier Laurent was likely in one of his restaurants, believing he'd struck a decisive blow. Landon was the first to break the silence. "We have options. We could delay publication, give legal more time to—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "Delaying is exactly what Laurent wants. It gives him time to build his case, to dig up more dirt, to possibly pressure other sources into silence." "He's right," Elise added, pulling out her tablet. "Besides, I've been monitoring social media since I got your call. Word is already spreading that something big is coming from you, Marcus. The anticipation is building organically. We'd be fools not to capitalize on that momentum." Landon removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You both know I believe in this book. Hell, it might be the most important work we publish this year, but I can't ignore the reality. Laurent has the resources to make this extremely difficult for all of us." Marcus leaned forward, setting his glass on the desk. "James, when you first agreed to publish Flavors of Resistance, when you told me you wanted books that changed conversations, not just contributed to them, this book, this moment, is exactly what you were talking about." "He's using your past against you," Landon pointed out. "He'll paint you as having a vendetta." "Let him," Marcus replied, a hint of steel entering his voice. "Because here's what Laurent doesn't understand. My past isn't something to be ashamed of. It's my credential. It's why I'm uniquely qualified to write this book." Elise nodded, her fingers flying across her tablet. "We can get ahead of this. If Laurent wants to make your history public, we beat him to it. We release a personal essay from you, your journey from chef to critic, how discrimination in the kitchen led you to advocate for change from outside it." "Controlled narrative," Landon mused. beginning to warm to the idea. Takes away his ammunition. Exactly, Elise continued, enthusiasm building in her voice. And I've been compiling a dossier on Laurent's restaurants for months as part of the research. The racial breakdown of his front-of-house staff versus back-of-house is damning enough on its own. Add in the salary disparities, the documented cases of discriminatory seating policies. It's not just about facts and figures, Marcus interjected, rising from his chair to pace the length of the office. Tonight at Bellamy's, that's the story. The way they treated me before they knew who I was versus after. That's what people need to understand. It's not just happening in Laurent's restaurants. It's happening everywhere, every night, to people who don't have the protection of my name or reputation. He stopped at the window, gazing out at the city below. Laurent thinks he can scare me by exposing my past. All he's doing is reminding me exactly why this book matters. Landon watched him for a moment, then nodded decisively. All right, we don't delay. In fact, we accelerate. Move the release date up by 2 weeks. Elise's eyes widened. That's aggressive. The marketing team will have a fit. They'll manage, Landon said with a dismissive wave. And you're right about getting ahead of the narrative. Marcus, I want that personal essay on my desk by morning. Elise, coordinate with digital. I want it published on our platform by noon tomorrow, with syndication to major outlets by the afternoon. Marcus turned back from the window, a determined glint in his eye. I'll need to add that chapter specifically about Laurent and his practices. Everything I've gathered, everything we've documented. It'll mean late nights for the design team, Landon warned. They'll understand when they read it, Marcus replied. This isn't just another chapter, it's the reason for the entire book. Elise was already typing notes, her focus absolute. I'll reach out to our sources within Laurent's organization again. Some were reluctant to go on record before, but knowing he's already on the offensive might change their calculus. Be careful, Marcus cautioned. Laurent will be watching them closely now. Use the secure channels we established. Landon stood, his decision made. I'll call an emergency meeting with the executive team for first thing tomorrow. If we're going to war with Xavier Laurent, everyone needs to be prepared for what's coming. The energy in the room had transformed. What had begun as a crisis meeting had evolved into a strategy session. The threat remained real, but they had found their footing, their path forward. As Elise and Landon began discussing logistics, Marcus returned to the window, his thoughts drifting back to his dinner at Bellamy's. The hostess's cold dismissal, the manager's transparent disdain, the way the entire restaurant had pivoted the moment they realized who he was. It was a microcosm of everything his book sought to expose. The culinary world's obsession with exclusivity didn't just keep certain diners out. It kept certain voices silent, certain perspectives hidden. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. Back off, Holloway. Some stories aren't worth telling. Marcus stared at the message, a cold certainty settling in his chest. Laurent was escalating faster than anticipated. The threat was vague enough to maintain deniability, but specific enough to make its intent clear. He could show the message to Landon and Elise, add it to the growing file of evidence against Laurent. But something held him back, a gut feeling that this particular battle was his alone. He deleted the message without responding, then turned back to the conversation in progress. We'll need security, he said, interrupting Elise mid-sentence. Not just for the offices, but for key personnel. Laurent isn't going to stop at legal threats. Landon's expression grew serious. You've received something already, haven't you? Marcus nodded, not elaborating. Just trust me on this. The more pressure we apply, the more desperate he'll become. All the more reason to move quickly, Elise said, her determination unshaken. The best protection is getting the truth out there as fast as possible. Once it's public, anything that happens to any of us looks suspicious. Marcus knew she was right, but he also understood how men like Laurent operated. They didn't just attack their enemies, they attacked what their enemies loved, which meant everyone associated with the book, everyone associated with Marcus, was potentially at risk. As if reading his thoughts, Landon placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, Marcus. Books that matter rarely are." Marcus met his publisher's gaze, grateful for the unwavering support but acutely aware of what he was asking of everyone in the room. "No, they're not," he agreed quietly, "but they're always necessary." Outside, the Los Angeles night deepened, the city's lights burning against the darkness like acts of defiance. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, Xavier Laurent was making his own plans, unaware that his threats had not weakened his opponent, but strengthened his resolve. The battle for the soul of the culinary world had begun, and Marcus Holloway was ready. Dawn broke over Los Angeles, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold as Marcus sat at his desk, the final sentence of his personal essay still hanging on the screen. He'd been writing through the night, excavating memories he'd long buried, the sting of Chef Michaels's casual racism, the humiliation of being passed over for promotions, the devastating realization that his talent would always be secondary to the color of his skin in that kitchen. But the essay wasn't just about pain, it was about transformation. How the very experiences meant to break him had instead forged him into something stronger, a voice that couldn't be silenced, an advocate who understood the struggle from the inside. He read over the final paragraph one more time. "When they pushed me out of the kitchen, they thought they were ending my career. Instead, they gave me a new platform, one far more powerful than a single restaurant could ever be. As a critic and author, I don't just serve meals, I serve truth. And the truth is that the culinary world, for all its talk of meritocracy and excellence, still sets different tables for different people. My upcoming book, The Invisible Menu, Race, Class, and the Politics of Fine Dining, isn't an attack on an industry I love. It's an invitation to make that industry better, to ensure that the only thing that matters when you walk through a restaurant's doors is your appreciation for what's on the plate, not the color of your skin or the designer of your clothes." With a deep breath, Marcus hit send, the email to Landon disappearing into the digital ether. It was done. The first countermove in what promised to be a complex game of chess with Laurent. By midday, his story would be public, removing Laurent's ability to weaponize his past. Marcus stretched, his body stiff from hours of typing. His apartment, a minimalist loft in the Arts District, was bathed in the soft light of morning, the wall of windows offering a panoramic view of the city awakening. On the bookshelves that lined one wall sat his awards, the James Beard, the culinary journalism prizes, the framed covers of his previous books. Tangible proof of a career built from the ashes of rejection. His phone buzzed with a text from Elise. "Heads up, Laurent's people have been calling every contact on our source list." Marcus frowned, typing back quickly. "Anyone talking?" The response came immediately. "Not yet, but the pressure's intense." Before he could reply, another message came through. Also, someone leaked that we're moving up the pub date. Laurent's lawyers just filed an emergency injunction to stop publication. Marcus swore under his breath. They'd expected legal maneuvers, but not this quickly. Laurent was moving faster than anticipated, which meant he was genuinely afraid of what the book contained. His phone rang. Landon. Marcus answered on the first ring. "I just saw Elise's text. How bad is it?" "Bad enough," Landon replied, his voice tight. "They're claiming we've engaged in reckless and defamatory character assassination without giving Laurent proper opportunity to respond." "That's bullshit," Marcus said, pacing now. "We sent his office 3 separate requests for comment. He declined each time. "I know," Landon sighed. "And our lawyers know. But this isn't about winning the case. It's about causing delays, bleeding us dry with legal fees, and generating negative press before the book even hits shelves." Marcus stopped at the window, watching as the city came to life beneath him. "Has legal read the injunction?" "They're reviewing it now. Emergency hearing is set for 2 p.m. "I should be there," Marcus said. "Actually," Landon replied, his tone shifting, "I think you should be somewhere else, somewhere very public." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "The Times wants an interview, in person, at their offices noon today. They caught wind of the essay and the moved-up publication date." A small smile curved Marcus's lips. "Strategic visibility." "Exactly. While Laurent's lawyers are trying to silence you in a courtroom, you'll be on the record with one of the biggest papers in the country." "I'll be there," Marcus promised. "Any word from the design team on the new chapter?" "They're working around the clock," Landon assured him. "Should have proofs to you by tonight." "Oh, and Marcus, the essay is perfect. It's all ready with digital. Goes live in 3 hours." After hanging up, Marcus headed to the shower, mind racing with preparations for the interview. He needed to be careful, revealing enough about the book to generate interest without giving Laurent's legal team new ammunition. It was a delicate balance, but one he'd mastered over years of navigating the intersection of food, culture, and politics. As the hot water cascaded over him, Marcus found himself thinking about his father. Jackson Holloway had been a chef too, not at Michelin-starred restaurants, but at a beloved neighborhood spot in Oakland that had fed the community for decades. "Cooking is politics," his father used to say. "Who gets to eat, what they get to eat, who gets to cook it. It's all political." Marcus had been 15 when his father died, the restaurant unable to survive after the building was purchased by developers who tripled the rent. That loss had shaped him as profoundly as any culinary school, teaching him that food wasn't just about taste, it was about power. By 11, Marcus was dressed in a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a deep burgundy tie, his armor for public appearances. His phone had been buzzing steadily all morning, colleagues expressing support, journalists seeking comments, and a particularly meaningful message from Chef Ramsay. "Heard what's happening. The industry's watching. Many of us are with you." The doorbell rang, his car service right on time. As Marcus gathered his things, his phone lit up with a notification. The essay had gone live, 2 hours ahead of schedule. Landon was accelerating the timeline, keeping Laurent off balance. The Los Angeles Times building stood as a testament to an earlier era of journalism, imposing yet elegant, its Art Deco details suggesting permanence in an increasingly ephemeral media landscape. Marcus was escorted through the lobby by a young assistant whose barely contained excitement suggested she was familiar with his work. "Your essay is already trending," she informed him as they rode the elevator. "My roommate's a chef at Osteria Mozza. She's been texting me all morning about it." Marcus smiled politely. "Good things, I hope." "Are you kidding?" She said, "It's all anyone in the kitchen is talking about. A lot of people have been waiting for someone to say these things out loud." The interview was set to take place in a glass-walled conference room, a calculated choice, Marcus suspected, allowing other staffers to observe while maintaining the pretense of privacy. Mia Winters, the paper's veteran food editor, was waiting for him, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. "Marcus," she greeted him, extending her hand. "It's been a while." 3 years, he confirmed, taking her hand. "The panel on culinary appropriation." Mia smiled wryly. "Where you thoroughly demolished that French chef who claimed he'd improved traditional Vietnamese techniques." "He deserved it," Marcus replied with a slight shrug. Yes, he did, Mia agreed, gesturing for him to sit. I've read your essay. Powerful stuff. I'm guessing that's why Xavier Laurent is trying to bury your book? Marcus settled into his chair, measuring his response. Laurent represents a system that benefits from exclusivity. My book challenges that system. According to our sources, Laurent's lawyers filed for an emergency injunction this morning, Mia said, placing a recorder on the table between them. Mind if I record? Marcus nodded his consent. So, Mia continued once the recorder was running, is it fair to say that Laurent sees your book as a threat to his business model? I think it's fair to say that Laurent sees my book as a threat to a status quo that has enriched him while excluding others, Marcus replied carefully. The culinary world loves to present itself as a meritocracy. If you work hard enough, have enough talent, you can succeed. My book demonstrates that for many people, especially people of color, that's simply not true. Mia leaned forward, her expression intense. You experienced this firsthand at Le Bernardin. I did, Marcus confirmed, grateful that the essay had allowed him to control this narrative. And my experience isn't unique. Every kitchen has its hierarchies, but those hierarchies often break down along racial lines. White chefs advance, chefs of color stagnate. Front of house is predominantly white, back of house predominantly brown. These aren't accidents, they're choices. And your book provides data to support this? Extensive data. Marcus nodded. We surveyed over 300 restaurants in 12 cities. The patterns are consistent and undeniable. Mia made a note, then looked up with a calculating gleam in her eye. Let's talk about last night at Bellamy's. Marcus stilled. You know about that? Word travels fast in this industry, Mia said with a small smile. Especially when Marcus Holloway is almost turned away from a restaurant, only to be recognized by the head chef and treated like royalty thereafter. Marcus considered deflecting but decided against it. The incident perfectly illustrated his book's thesis. What happened at Bellamy's happens every day to people who don't have my name or reputation, he said. They're treated differently based on how they look, not who they are. The hostess saw a black man in casual clothes and automatically assumed I didn't belong. When my identity was revealed, suddenly I was worthy of respect. He paused, making sure his next words were precise. That transformation, from unwelcome to honored in the span of seconds, tells you everything you need to know about the industry's biases. For the next 45 minutes, Marcus navigated Mia's increasingly probing questions, revealing enough about the book to make the interview worthwhile, while carefully avoiding specifics that might jeopardize the legal case. As they were wrapping up, Mia asked the question he'd been expecting all along. Your publisher is moving up the release date by 2 weeks. Is that in direct response to Laurent's attempts to block publication? Marcus smiled. We always intended to publish when the book was ready. It's ready now. Mia clearly wasn't satisfied with the non-answer, but before she could press further, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Landon. Injunction denied. Judge saw through their delay tactics. We're clear to publish. Relief washed over Marcus, though he kept his expression neutral. If there's nothing else, Mia, I should be going. I have a book to finish. As they shook hands, Mia held his gaze. Laurent won't stop with legal challenges. Men like him have other ways of fighting back. I'm counting on it, Marcus replied quietly. The harder he fights, the more he proves my point. Outside the Times building, Marcus checked his phone again. The essay had been live for just over an hour and had already been shared thousands of times. Comment sections were exploding, social media was ablaze, and 3 national morning shows had requested interviews. The narrative was shifting. Laurent had wanted to paint Marcus as a disgruntled ex-chef with a personal vendetta. Instead, Marcus was emerging as what he truly was, a voice for the voiceless in an industry built on silence. As his car pulled away from the curb, Marcus noticed a black SUV with tinted windows pulling out behind them. It could be nothing. Downtown LA was always crowded with similar vehicles. But the timing felt deliberate. He made a mental note to mention it to his driver, but wasn't particularly concerned. Laurent's intimidation tactics were predictable. Marcus had anticipated them from the beginning. What he hadn't anticipated was the text that came through as they turned onto Wilshire Boulevard. "Check your email. You have 1 hour to respond." The number was blocked, but the sender was clear. Marcus opened his email to find a message from an anonymous account. The subject line read simply, "The real story." Inside was a single video file. With a growing sense of unease, Marcus downloaded and played it. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Surveillance video from inside Le Bernardin's kitchen, dated 12 years ago. It showed a younger Marcus in heated argument with Chef Michaels, their faces inches apart. There was no audio, but the confrontation was obviously intense. It ended with Marcus shoving Michaels hard enough to make him stumble backward into a prep table. A moment Marcus had tried to forget. A moment that had never been made public. A moment that, taken out of context, could destroy everything he'd built. Marcus stared at the frozen image on his phone screen, his pulse thundering in his ears. The timestamp in the corner of the video confirmed what he already knew. This footage was from his final day at Le Bernardin, moments before security had escorted him from the building. What the silent video couldn't show was the context. The weeks of racial slurs disguised as kitchen banter, the promotions given to less qualified white chefs, and most importantly, what Chef Michaels had said just before Marcus had shoved him. "No matter how good you are, boy, you'll always be the help. That's just how it is. That's how it's always going to be." The memory of those words still burned even 12 years later. But without audio, all anyone would see was Marcus being physically aggressive, confirmation of every stereotype about angry black men that he'd spent his career disproving. A second text arrived. "TikTok, Holloway. 1 video to every food publication by 2 p.m. unless you issue a statement withdrawing your book. Template statement in the email." Marcus scrolled down to find Laurent's proposed capitulation, a groveling retraction claiming the book contained unverified claims and personal vendettas. The statement ended with an apology to Laurent personally for unfounded allegations that could damage his well-deserved reputation. Marcus's jaw tightened. Laurent thought he had found the perfect leverage, a threat that exploited not just Marcus's past but the very racial dynamics his book sought to expose. If Marcus fought back, the video would feed the narrative that he was an angry, unstable figure with a personal grudge. If he capitulated, his professional credibility would be destroyed. It was a perfectly executed trap. Or it would have been if Laurent had been dealing with anyone other than Marcus Holloway. Marcus forwarded the email to Landon and Elise with a brief message. "Laurent's next move, don't panic, call me." Then he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Maya Daniels." "Maya, it's Marcus. Marcus Holloway." A pause. "Marcus, it's been a long time." "Too long," he agreed. "I need your help. It's about Le Bernardin, about what really happened that day." Maya had been a line cook at Le Bernardin when Marcus was sous chef. She'd witnessed everything, the discrimination, the harassment, the final confrontation. After Marcus had been fired, she'd stayed for another 6 months before leaving herself, disgusted by the toxic culture but needing the prestigious name on her resume. "I saw your essay this morning," Maya said, her voice cautious. "You're finally telling the story." "Not all of it," Marcus replied. "Not yet. Laurent has the surveillance video from my last day, the one with Michaels. He's threatening to release it without context." Maya swore softly. That manipulative bastard. What do you need from me? Your testimony, on the record, about what Michael said, what he did, not just to me, but to everyone who didn't fit his idea of who belonged in that kitchen. Another pause, longer this time. You know what that could mean for my career. I'm executive chef at Oriole now. The industry still protects its own. I know, Marcus said quietly, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. He heard Maya take a deep breath. Send me the details, where and when. Thank you, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. There's one more thing. Were there others who might speak up, other witnesses from that day? David Chen, Maya replied without hesitation. He was prepping at the station right next to you. Heard everything. Last I heard, he had his own place in Chicago, Jade Garden, won a Beard Award last year. I remember David, Marcus said, already making mental notes. Anyone else? Maybe Sophia Rodriguez. She was working pastry then. She's at 11 Madison Park now, one of their sous chefs. By the time Marcus ended the call, he had the names of 4 potential witnesses, former colleagues who had seen firsthand what had happened at Le Bernardin. Whether they would all be willing to speak publicly was another question entirely, but Maya's support alone was significant. She had nothing to gain and much to lose by coming forward. His car had arrived at his apartment building. As he entered the lobby, his phone rang. Landon. I just saw the email, his publisher said without preamble. Tell me you have a plan. I have a plan, Marcus confirmed, stepping into the elevator. I need an emergency meeting. You, me, Elise, legal, and PR. 1 hour. They're already on their way to the office, Landon assured him. But Marcus, this video is exactly what Laurent thinks it is, Marcus interrupted. Damaging if viewed without context, but it's also proof that he's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. An hour later, Marcus sat at the head of Epicurean's conference table, surrounded by his team. The atmosphere was tense but focused. On the screen at the end of the room, the video played on a loop, each team member watching with grim expressions. So that's it, Carolyn Wu, the head of legal, said when the footage ended. Without audio, without context, it looks bad, especially given the current climate. It looks like exactly what it was, Marcus corrected. A man pushed to his breaking point after months of racist treatment. The problem isn't the shove, it's the lack of context. And you have witnesses who can provide that context? Carolyn asked, her expression skeptical. I have 4 former colleagues who were present that day, Marcus confirmed. One has already agreed to speak on the record. I'm contacting the others now. Mike Jensen, the head of PR, leaned forward. Even with context, releasing this video will shift the narrative. Laurent knows what he's doing. He's trying to make this about your character, not your message. Then we don't let him, Elise interjected forcefully. We go on offense. Release the video ourselves with full context. Statements from witnesses, the complete story of what led to that moment. Isn't that playing into his hands? Landon asked. Marcus shook his head. Not if we control the rollout. Laurent wants to use this video to discredit me by portraying me as an angry black man who can't be trusted. But what if we frame it differently? What if this video becomes evidence of the very problem my book addresses? The systematic racism in high-end kitchens that pushes talented people to their breaking points? A thoughtful silence fell over the room as the team considered his approach. It's risky, Mike finally said, but it could work, especially if we have those witness statements ready to go the moment we release the video. What about Laurent's deadline? Carolyn asked. He's given us less than 30 minutes now. We ignore it, Marcus said firmly. We don't negotiate with bullies. Agreed, Landon nodded. But we need to be prepared for the fallout when he releases the video. He won't, Marcus said with quiet confidence. Not yet, anyway. All eyes turned to him, questioning. Laurent didn't get where he is by being impulsive, Marcus explained. He's calculated. Right now he thinks he has leverage. He's expecting us to either cave or try to negotiate for more time. He won't release the video until he's certain we're not going to meet his demands. That buys us a few hours at most, Elise pointed out. That's all we need, Marcus replied. Enough time to reach the other witnesses, prepare their statements, and craft our response. By the time Laurent realizes we're not playing by his rules, we'll already have reframed the narrative. As the team dispersed to execute the plan, Landon held Marcus back. Are you sure about this? Once those witnesses go public, there's no going back, for them or for you. Marcus met his publisher's concerned gaze. Chef Michaels told me I'd always be the help. Laurent thinks he can silence me with this video. They're two sides of the same coin. Men who believe they have the power to determine who belongs and who doesn't. His voice hardened. They're wrong. And it's time everyone knew it. Over the next 3 hours, Marcus's apartment became a command center. David Chen had immediately agreed to provide a statement, as had Sofia Rodriguez. The fourth witness, a former server named Julian Webb, was initially hesitant but ultimately committed to sharing his account after reading Marcus's essay. By 6 that evening, they had 4 sworn statements corroborating Marcus's account of the events at Le Bernardin. Not just from the final confrontation, but from the months of discrimination that had preceded it. Each statement detailed specific instances, Chef Michaels repeatedly passing over Marcus for opportunities given to less experienced white chefs. The racial jokes that weren't jokes at all, the different standards applied to different members of the kitchen based solely on race. Marcus had just finished a call with Maya when Elise arrived at his apartment, looking triumphant. We got him, she announced, connecting her laptop to Marcus's TV. Take a look at this. The screen displayed an email chain, clearly forwarded from someone within Laurent's organization. The emails exchanged between Laurent and his head of security explicitly discussed obtaining the surveillance footage from Le Bernardin, footage that should have been destroyed years ago as part of the confidential settlement. Where did you get this? Marcus asked, scanning the damning exchange. Remember that assistant who quit Laurent's company last month? The one who filed a harassment complaint that mysteriously disappeared from HR records? Elise's smile was razor sharp. Turns out she kept receipts, lots of them. This proves Laurent illegally obtained the footage, Marcus said, feeling the tide turning. It violates the terms of my settlement agreement. Exactly, Elise confirmed. Carolyn says it's enough to file for an injunction of our own, preventing Laurent from releasing the video under threat of significant legal penalties. Marcus studied the emails again, a plan forming. We still release our full account, he decided. The witnesses, the context, everything. But now we add this, proof that Laurent is willing to break the law to silence criticism. Already in the works, Elise assured him. Digital team is building a microsite as we speak. Everything goes live at 9 p.m., prime time for social media impact. As Elise coordinated final details, Marcus's phone buzzed with another text from the blocked number. Time's up, Holloway. You've made your choice. But no video appeared online. No food publications reported receiving the footage. Laurent was bluffing, or more likely, waiting for the perfect moment to maximize damage. A moment that would never come. At precisely 9 p.m., Epicurean Publishing simultaneously released a comprehensive digital package across all platforms, the full surveillance video, complete with transcripts of what was said based on witness testimony, sworn statements from Marcus's former colleagues, a detailed account of the systemic discrimination at Le Bernardin, and the email evidence proving Laurent had illegally obtained the footage in violation of a confidential settlement. The headline was simple but devastating. The kitchen's dirty secret, how the culinary elite silences voices of color. Within minutes, The story exploded across social media. Food journalists who had received Laurent's threatening emails about the video came forward, revealing his attempts to manipulate the narrative. Chefs and restaurant workers began sharing their own experiences with discrimination, creating a cascading effect that quickly became the industry's own version of the Nasser Me Too movement. By midnight, the hashtag #ShawKitchenTruth was trending nationwide. Marcus watched it all unfold from his living room, surrounded by his team, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication that the truth was finally being told, sorrow that so many had suffered in silence for so long. His phone rang. Chef Ramsay. "You clever bastard," the chef said when Marcus answered. "Laurent's having a meltdown. Just fired his entire PR team." "How do you know?" Ramsay chuckled. "I'm at Osteria. He's in the private dining room screaming loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. It's quite the spectacle." "Good," Marcus said simply. "You should know," Ramsay added, his tone turning serious. "People are talking, not just about Laurent or Michael's, about all of it, the whole system. You've started something, Marcus." "No," Marcus corrected quietly. "I just gave it a voice." As he ended the call, Marcus gazed out at the Los Angeles skyline, lights twinkling against the darkness. Somewhere out there, Xavier Laurent was realizing that he had made a fatal miscalculation. He had assumed Marcus would either bend or break under pressure. Instead, Marcus had done what he'd been doing his entire career, turned exclusion into influence, rejection into power, silence into a rallying cry that could no longer be ignored. The morning after the Buchanan Kitchen Truth explosion, Marcus woke to a flood of notifications. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages of support, media requests and stories, so many stories, from restaurant workers across the country sharing their own experiences of discrimination. The movement he'd ignited had already outgrown him, taking on a life of its own as voices long silenced found courage in collective testimony. Marcus scrolled through them all, reading accounts that echoed his own with painful familiarity. Black servers relegated to back sections of restaurants. Latino chefs passed over for promotions despite outperforming their white colleagues. Asian workers asked to stay in the kitchen, where customers can't see them. The most recent notification was from an unknown number with an attached image. Despite his better judgment, Marcus opened it. It was a photograph of a young black woman in chef's whites, her expression determined as she worked at a high-end restaurant line. The message read, "My daughter Zoe just made sous chef at Perse, first black woman to hold the position. She said your essay gave her courage to fight for the promotion she deserved instead of accepting another lateral move. Thank you." Marcus sat with that for a moment, a profound sense of purpose washing over him. This was why the book mattered. This was why the fight mattered. For every Zoe who might now have a different path than his own. His contemplation was interrupted by another call. Elise. "Have you seen the post?" she asked without preamble. "Not yet," Marcus replied, reaching for his tablet. "Page 6. They're calling it the Laurent implosion. 3 of his restaurant's executive chefs have resigned in solidarity with the movement. His flagship in New York is practically empty. Reservations down 80% overnight." Marcus pulled up the article, scanning the details. Laurent's carefully constructed empire was showing cracks, his reputation crumbling in real time as the industry he'd exploited turned against him. "What about the book?" Marcus asked. "That's why I'm calling," Elise said, her voice lifting with excitement. "Pre-orders have exploded. We're already in our 3rd printing, and the book hasn't even been released yet. Landon wants to move the publication date up again, next week instead of 2 weeks from now. Strike while the iron is hot." "Do it," Marcus agreed. "Have the design team finished the Laurent chapter?" "Sent to your email an hour ago," Elise confirmed. "It's devastating, Marcus. The personal accounts, the data analysis, the documented patterns across all his restaurants. It's everything we hoped for and more. After reviewing the chapter and suggesting minor edits, Marcus prepared for his next move. The momentum was with them now, but Laurent was dangerous precisely because he had so much to lose. The attacks would continue, likely becoming more personal and more vicious. As if on cue, his phone rang again. Landon this time, his voice tense. Laurent's lawyers just called. They're threatening to sue not just Epicurean, but you personally. They're claiming defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and breach of confidentiality. Let them, Marcus replied calmly. Every legal action just draws more attention to the issues we're raising. There's more, Landon continued. They've approached your ex-wife. Marcus stilled. Vanessa? What could she possibly have to say that would help them? I don't know, Landon admitted. But Laurent's people have been calling everyone from your past, looking for anything they can use. Marcus and Vanessa had divorced amicably 8 years ago, their careers pulling them in different directions. She'd moved to Paris to study French cuisine, while he'd stayed in New York to build his career as a critic. They'd remained friendly, checking in occasionally, but living separate lives. I'll call her, Marcus said, already scrolling through his contacts. Good. And Marcus, be careful. Laurent is getting desperate. After hanging up, Marcus dialed Vanessa's number, calculating the time difference. It would be evening in Paris. She answered on the third ring. Marcus, I was wondering when you'd call. You've heard from Laurent's people, he said, not bothering with preliminaries. 2 days ago, she confirmed. Some lawyer offering an exclusive interview opportunity about my unique insights into your character. And, Marcus prompted, holding his breath. Vanessa's laugh was warm and familiar, and I told them exactly where they could stick their opportunity. Honestly, Marcus, what do they think I'd say? That you were secretly a terrible person during our marriage? That you have a hidden agenda? We divorced because our careers took us in different directions, not because you were secretly a monster. Relief washed over him. Thank you, Vanessa. Don't thank me for basic human decency, she replied. Besides, I've been following what's happening. Your essay, the movement it sparked, it's important work, Marcus. It's the book you've always wanted to write. They spoke for a few more minutes, catching up briefly before Vanessa had to leave for dinner service at her restaurant. As he ended the call, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Laurent could dig all he wanted. There were no skeletons in his closet, no secrets that would undermine his message. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had completed a series of interviews with major news outlets, each one amplifying the growing movement. Kitchen Truth had evolved into a full-blown reckoning, with restaurant workers across the country sharing their experiences and demanding change. Industry leaders were being forced to respond, some issuing hollow statements of commitment to diversity, others announcing concrete policy changes and audits of their hiring practices. As Marcus prepared for a live television interview, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Amara Jenkins from Roots and Soul. You promised to visit when we met at Bellamy's. If you're free this evening, we're having a community dinner with some industry people to discuss next steps for the movement. 7 p.m., no cameras, no press, just people who care. Marcus remembered Amara, the young chef who had approached his table at Bellamy's, whose restaurant celebrated her Jamaican heritage. He texted back a confirmation, grateful for the chance to connect with fellow industry professionals in a setting away from the media spotlight. Roots and Soul was located in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood in East Los Angeles, its modest storefront contrasting sharply with the sleek boutiques and artisanal coffee shops that had recently populated the area. Inside, however, the restaurant hummed with warmth and energy. The decor was a thoughtful blend of Caribbean influences and California minimalism, bright textiles against white walls, handcrafted wooden tables, and a wall of photographs documenting the neighborhood's history. As Marcus entered, the room fell momentarily silent before erupting in spontaneous applause. Amara approached, her smile wide and genuine as she extended her hand. "You actually came," she said, sounding pleasantly surprised. "I keep my promises," Marcus replied, taking in the diverse group of restaurant workers gathered around the communal tables. "Beautiful place you have here." "Thank you," Amara said, leading him toward the back of the restaurant. "It's not Bellamy's, but it's honest. Every dish tells a story. My grandmother's recipes, my mother's techniques, my own interpretations." "Those are the best kind of stories," Marcus said, feeling immediately at home among the mingled aromas of Scotch bonnet peppers, allspice, and slow-cooked meats. The dinner that followed was unlike any Marcus had experienced in years. There were no pretenses, no performative service, just genuine hospitality and extraordinary food. Amara's oxtail stew was a revelation, rich, complex, deeply satisfying in a way that spoke to both tradition and innovation. As they ate, the conversation flowed freely, chefs and servers and line cooks sharing their experiences and ideas for transforming the industry. Maya Daniels was there, having flown in from New York specifically for this gathering. "After my statement went public, my restaurant's owners called me in," she told the group. "I thought they were going to fire me. Instead, they asked what changes I thought we needed to make. Actually asked me, after 5 years of me trying to tell them." Similar stories emerged around the table. The movement was creating space for long overdue conversations, forcing those in power to listen to voices they had previously ignored. But there were also stories of backlash, threats, lost jobs, blacklisting by powerful figures in the industry who feared what true equality might mean for their empires. "Laurent isn't the only one," a pastry chef from a prominent hotel restaurant pointed out. "He's just the most visible target right now. The whole system is built on these hierarchies." "That's why the book matters," Marcus said, addressing the group for the first time that evening. "It's not just about Laurent or even about the high-end restaurant world. It's about who gets to be considered an authority on food, whose cuisines are deemed elevated versus ethnic, who gets investment capital to open restaurants, who gets reviewed by major publications. It's all connected." As the conversation continued, Marcus found himself particularly drawn to Amara's perspective. Despite being relatively new to restaurant ownership, she spoke with clarity and conviction about the changes needed in the industry. "My grandmother cooked in the homes of wealthy white families her entire life," she explained. "Her food was good enough to nourish them, but never considered sophisticated enough to be served in restaurants. I opened Roots and Soul to honor her legacy, to show that our food doesn't need to be filtered through European techniques to be worthy of recognition." "Have you faced pushback?" Marcus asked. Amara laughed, the sound both bitter and resigned. "Every day. Critics who call the food surprisingly refined, as if that's a compliment. Investors who suggested we tone down the spices to appeal to a broader audience. Customers who are shocked to discover the owner is also the executive chef." The conversation was interrupted when Amara's sous chef approached with a concerned expression. "There's someone outside," he said quietly, "a guy in a suit, taking photos of everyone who enters or leaves." Marcus and Maya exchanged glances. "Laurent's people," Maya said. "They're monitoring the movement, keeping track of who's involved." "Let them," Amara replied, her voice steady. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're having dinner and conversation. Last I checked, that's still legal." Despite her brave words, a tension had entered the room. The gathering had been intended as a safe space, away from the public eye. Now that security felt compromised, Marcus stood, addressing the group. "If anyone feels uncomfortable having their presence here documented, I understand. But know this. They're taking pictures because they're afraid. They're afraid because this movement, what all of you have started, is working. It's forcing accountability, it's creating change. An older chef from the back of the room raised his hand. I've been cooking professionally for 40 years, he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Been passed over, talked down to, watched white boys I trained become my boss more times than I can count. If they want to take my picture standing with all of you, they can go right ahead. I'm not hiding anymore. A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. One by one, those who had been momentarily shaken regained their resolve. The conversation resumed, more determined than before. As the evening wound down, Marcus helped Amara clear plates while the others continued their discussions in smaller groups. "Thank you for creating this space," he said as they worked side by side. "This is where real change begins, not in media statements or corporate policies, but in rooms like this, with people who understand both the problems and the solutions." Amara smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "I just hope it lasts. Movements have a way of burning bright and then fading when the next news cycle hits." "Not this one," Marcus promised. "Not if we keep showing up, keep speaking out, keep supporting each other." He gestured around the restaurant. "Places like Roots and Soul, they're the future. Authentic food created by people with genuine connections to the cultures they're representing, without gatekeepers deciding what's elevated enough to matter." As Marcus prepared to leave, exchanging contact information with several of the attendees, his phone buzzed with yet another message from Landon. "Laurent just announced press conference tomorrow, 9 a.m. Says he has revelations about you and the movement. Be prepared." Dawn broke over Los Angeles with an unusual chill, as if the city itself was bracing for the confrontation to come. Marcus stood at his apartment window, watching the sun paint the skyline in gold and crimson, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. The message from Landon had kept him awake most of the night, his mind cycling through possibilities of what Laurent might reveal. The truth was, there wasn't much to reveal. Marcus had lived his life with intentional transparency, knowing that as a black man in a white-dominated industry, he would be held to a different standard. Every misstep would be magnified, every flaw used as evidence that he didn't belong. So he had been careful, deliberate, measured in all his professional interactions. If Laurent had found something genuinely damaging, it would be a fabrication. His phone rang, Elise calling earlier than usual. "I'm already on it," she said as soon as he answered. "I've got contacts at every major network and news outlet. The moment Laurent makes his move, we'll be ready to respond." "Any hints about what he's planning?" Marcus asked. "Nothing concrete," Elise admitted. "But my source inside his organization says he's been meeting with someone from your culinary school days, a former classmate." Marcus frowned, mentally scrolling through his time at the Culinary Institute of America. Who from that period would have anything meaningful to say about him? He'd been focused, ambitious, largely keeping to himself as one of the few black students in his cohort. Then it hit him. Andrew Patterson. "That sounds right," Elise confirmed. "Who is he?" Marcus sighed, the memory surfacing with unexpected clarity. "We were in the same year at CIA. There was an incident during our final semester, a competition for a prestigious internship at a 3-star restaurant in Paris. Patterson was the favorite, but I won." "Let me guess," Elise said. "He didn't take it well." "That's putting it mildly," Marcus replied. "He accused me of cheating, claimed I'd copied his technique for the final dish. It was baseless. We had completely different approaches. But he was convinced the judges had chosen me because of political correctness." "Sounds like exactly the kind of person Laurent would seek out," Elise noted. "Someone with a grudge and a convenient narrative that fits his agenda." Marcus set down his coffee cup, suddenly understanding Laurent's strategy. "He's going to try to undermine the movement by painting me as someone who uses racism as an excuse, who cries discrimination to gain advantages. He shook his head, anger building. It's insidious, designed to make people question not just me, but every experience shared as part of Fresh Kitchen Truth. What do you want to do? Elise asked. We could preempt with our own statement about Patterson, get ahead of whatever story they're constructing. Marcus considered this, weighing options. No, he decided, we don't play defense. Let Laurent make his move, and then we'll counter with something he doesn't expect. After ending the call, Marcus reached out to Landon, requesting an urgent virtual meeting with the full publishing team. Within an hour, faces filled his screen, legal, marketing, PR, and editorial all waiting for direction. Laurent's press conference is a distraction, Marcus began, his voice steady with conviction. He wants to shift focus from systemic issues to personal attacks. We don't engage directly. Then what's our approach? Mike from PR asked, looking skeptical. We accelerate, Marcus replied. The book comes out tomorrow. A stunned silence fell over the virtual meeting. Landon recovered first. Tomorrow? Marcus, even with the expedited timeline, we're still 5 days out from release. The distribution channels, digital release first, Marcus interrupted. E-book, audiobook, available for immediate download. Physical copies can follow according to the existing schedule. The publishing team exchanged glances, a mixture of excitement and apprehension evident in their expressions. It's bold, Landon finally said. Laurent announces his revelations at 9 a.m., and by noon, readers already have access to your full argument, complete with evidence, testimony, and data. Exactly, Marcus nodded. We don't fight his narrative, we overwhelm it with the truth. The decision made, the team sprang into action, reorganizing release plans and coordinating with digital platforms. Marcus spent the next 2 hours recording last-minute updates to the audiobook, including a new preface addressing the movement that had already begun in response to his essay. At 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before Laurent's scheduled press conference, Marcus received a call from an unexpected source, Chef Michaels himself. Marcus stared at the name on his phone screen, a surge of emotions rising within him. After a moment's hesitation, he answered, Michaels. Holloway. The voice was older but unmistakable, carrying the same authoritative tone that had once commanded one of New York's most prestigious kitchens. Been a long time. 12 years, Marcus confirmed, keeping his voice neutral. What can I do for you? A pause, then. Laurent reached out to me. Wanted me to make a statement supporting his version of events. Thought you should know. Marcus hadn't expected this. And will you? Another pause, longer this time. No. Whatever happened between us, and we both know plenty happened, it's in the past. But what you're doing now with this movement, it matters. The industry needs it. Has for a long time. The admission stunned Marcus into momentary silence. Of all the possible scenarios he'd considered for this day, reconciliation with Chef Michaels hadn't been among them. Thank you, he finally said, meaning it. Don't thank me, Michaels replied gruffly. I'm not doing it for you. The culinary world is changing, and those of us who've been part of the old guard need to either change with it or get out of the way. He cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I've been following your career. You've done good work, Holloway. The call ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Marcus to process this unexpected development. There was no time to dwell on it, however. Laurent's press conference was about to begin. Marcus turned on the television where a local news channel was already showing the ornate conference room at Laurent's flagship Los Angeles restaurant. The setting was deliberate, a display of power and prestige, a reminder of all Laurent had built and all he stood to lose. The restaurant mogul appeared at precisely 9 a.m., immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Following close behind was Andrew Patterson, looking uncomfortable but determined, and several other individuals Marcus didn't immediately recognize. Laurent approached the podium with practiced confidence, adjusting the microphone before addressing the assembled press. Good morning. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I've called this press conference to address the disturbing allegations being made against me and my restaurants by Marcus Holloway and his followers. He paused, his expression shifting to one of grave concern. Let me be clear. Discrimination in any form has no place in the culinary world. My restaurants have always prided themselves on being meritocracies, places where talent and hard work are rewarded regardless of background. Marcus watched, unsurprised by Laurent's opening move, positioning himself as a champion of fairness while undermining the very concept of systemic bias. However, Laurent continued, his tone hardening, what we're witnessing is not a genuine movement for equality, but a calculated campaign led by an individual with a history of leveraging accusations of discrimination for personal advancement. He gestured to Patterson, who stepped forward stiffly. With me today is Andrew Patterson, an award-winning chef who attended the Culinary Institute of America with Mr. Holloway. He has an important perspective to share. Patterson approached the microphone, clearly nervous but pushing through it. Marcus Holloway and I were competitors at CIA. In our final semester, there was a competition for an internship in Paris, an opportunity that could make a career. I was favored to win based on my consistent performance throughout the program. He paused, glancing at Laurent as if seeking reassurance before continuing. When Holloway won instead, it raised questions. Many of us believed the decision was influenced by external pressures, specifically the school's desire to showcase diversity rather than selecting strictly on merit. Marcus watched impassively as Patterson recounted his version of events, distorting reality to fit Laurent's narrative. What Patterson failed to mention was that the competition had been blind judged. The panel hadn't known which student prepared which dish until after the decision was made. Laurent returned to the podium, his expression solemn. This pattern continued throughout Mr. Holloway's career. His dismissal from Le Bernardin, which he now frames as a response to discrimination, followed similar allegations of preferential treatment. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from his team, all watching the press conference with growing indignation. But Marcus remained calm, even as Laurent introduced two more speakers, former restaurant critics who claimed Marcus had used accusations of bias to intimidate establishments into favorable reviews. The claims were becoming increasingly outlandish, designed not to be believed entirely, but to sow doubt, to make people question the legitimacy of Nair Kitchen Truth and its foundational experiences. Just as Laurent prepared to introduce his final speaker, Marcus's phone lit up with an incoming call, Maya Daniels. "Are you watching this farce?" she demanded without preamble. "Every minute," Marcus confirmed. "That woman he just brought up, Vanessa Carter, she claims to have worked with you at the Tribune food section." "Yes, briefly," Marcus said, trying to place the name. "She was fired for plagiarism 3 years ago," Maya said triumphantly. "I know because I was the one who caught her copying passages from my blog for one of her reviews. She blamed you in her exit interview, said you had set her up." This was valuable information, exactly the kind of context that could unravel Laurent's carefully constructed narrative. "Can you document this?" Marcus asked. "Officially?" "Already texting you the links to the official retraction the Tribune published," Maya replied. "And I've got screenshots of the original plagiarized content. She has zero credibility." As Laurent's press conference continued, Marcus's team was already building a counter-strategy, gathering evidence that contradicted each speaker's claims. Patterson's allegation about the CIA competition collapsed when they obtained a statement from one of the original judges confirming the blind evaluation process. The former critics' claims withered under scrutiny of their own professional histories, which included numerous ethical lapses. But the most powerful response wasn't coming from Marcus or his publisher. It was coming from the culinary community itself. As Laurent spoke, chefs, servers, and restaurant workers across the country were sharing their own experiences with the hashtag #InTruthToPower, creating a wave of testimony that overwhelmed Laurent's manufactured narrative. By the time Laurent concluded his press conference with a somber call for a return to civility and fair evaluation in our industry, the story had already shifted beneath his feet. Social media was flooded not with discussions of his accusations, but with personal accounts that validated everything Marcus had been saying, and precisely at noon, as promised, the invisible menu was released in digital format across all major platforms. Within an hour, it had shot to the top of every bestseller list, downloaded by readers eager to see the evidence Laurent had tried so desperately to suppress. The press conference that had been designed to destroy Marcus Holloway's credibility had instead cemented his legacy as the voice of a movement that could no longer be silenced. The 48 hours following Laurent's press conference and the digital release of The Invisible Menu unfolded with the intensity of a kitchen during a Saturday night rush. Marcus barely slept, moving from interview to interview as demand for his perspective exploded across all media platforms. Morning shows, evening news, podcasts, radio, everyone wanted to hear from the man whose book had transformed from a culinary industry expose into a national conversation about race, power, and belonging. The controversy had pushed the book far beyond its expected audience. People who had never dined at a fine restaurant were downloading it, drawn by the universal themes of exclusion and resilience. Critics who received advance copies were publishing rave reviews, praising not just the meticulously documented evidence but the powerful personal narrative that framed it. "Holloway has accomplished something remarkable," wrote the Times reviewer. "He's created a work that functions simultaneously as investigative journalism, cultural criticism, and deeply moving memoir. The Invisible Menu doesn't just reveal the culinary world's biases, it offers a blueprint for dismantling them." By the end of the second day, Epicurean Publishing had announced an unprecedented fifth printing of the physical book, which wouldn't even hit stores for another 3 days. The digital version had been downloaded over 1 million times, shattering records for culinary literature and prompting comparisons to watershed moments in food writing like Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Marcus watched it all unfold from a strange remove, as if observing someone else's life. The magnitude of what was happening, what he had started, felt almost too immense to comprehend. This wasn't just about Laurent anymore, or even about fine dining. It had become a referendum on who gets to belong in spaces of power and privilege, who gets to define excellence, who gets to be seen. On the evening of the second day, Marcus was preparing for an appearance on a national news program when Elise called, her voice pitched higher than usual with excitement. "You need to see this," she said. Turning Point just went live with an investigative piece on Laurent's business practices. They've got internal documents showing he specifically instructed managers to seat people of color away from windows and VIP sections. There are actual training manuals, Marcus. Marcus felt a grim vindication. "Who leaked them?" "Anonymous source," Elise replied, "but my guess, someone from last night's dinner at Roots and Soul. The industry is turning on him, Marcus. It's happening faster than anyone predicted." The news only intensified over the next hours. 3 more executive chefs resigned from Laurent restaurants. Reservations had plummeted across his entire empire. Celebrity patrons were publicly announcing they would no longer dine at his establishments. Even his investors were beginning to distance themselves, issuing carefully worded statements about taking these allegations seriously and reviewing their partnerships. Laurent himself had gone silent since the press conference, retreating behind a wall of lawyers and PR representatives who offered increasingly desperate statements that did nothing to stem the tide of public opinion. As Marcus prepared for yet another interview, he found his thoughts drifting back to his dinner at Bellamy's, how it had all started with that moment of casual discrimination, that assumption that he didn't belong. If the hostess had simply treated him with basic respect, if the manager had acknowledged their error honestly instead of making excuses, would any of this be happening? Perhaps not in this exact way or at this exact moment, but Marcus knew it had been inevitable. The pressure had been building for too long, the injustices too pervasive to remain unchallenged forever. His phone rang, an unknown number. Against his better judgment, Marcus answered. "Holloway," said a voice he instantly recognized as Xavier Laurent's. The restaurant mogul sounded strained, his usual polish giving way to barely contained fury. "Laurent," Marcus replied evenly. "I'm surprised you're calling directly. No lawyers or PR team this time?" "This has gone far enough," Laurent said, ignoring the jab. "You've made your point. You've sold your books. You've had your moment. Now it's time to end this before you destroy an entire industry." Marcus almost laughed at the dramatic claim. The only thing being destroyed is a system that never should have existed in the first place. The industry will survive. It'll just be more equitable, more accessible. "You naive fool," Laurent hissed, his composure cracking further. "You think this is about equality? This is about revenge. You couldn't make it as a chef, so you're tearing down those who did." "Is that what you need to tell yourself?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about Laurent's self-deception. "That this is personal vindictiveness rather than a long overdue reckoning?" "I built my restaurants from nothing," Laurent continued, as if Marcus hadn't spoken. "Decades of work, of sacrifice, of excellence, and you're willing to burn it all down for what? So people can feel good about themselves? So mediocrity can reign in the name of diversity?" There it was, the core of Laurent's worldview laid bare, the belief that excellence and inclusivity were somehow mutually exclusive, that diversity necessarily meant lowering standards rather than expanding the definition of what constituted the best. "That's where you're wrong," Marcus said quietly. "This isn't about lowering standards. It's about recognizing that talent comes in all colors and backgrounds. It's about acknowledging that the best has always been defined by people who look like you for the benefit of people who look like you." "Spare me your social justice lecture," Laurent snapped. "What will it take to end this? Name your price." Marcus felt a chill at the blatant attempt at bribery. "There is no price, Laurent. This isn't a negotiation." "Everyone has a price," Laurent insisted. $1 million, $5 million, your own restaurant, fully funded. Tell me what you want." "I want change," Marcus replied simply. "Real, lasting change. Not just in your restaurants, but everywhere. No amount of money can buy that. It has to be earned through genuine commitment and hard work." Laurent was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, a new calculation evident in his tone. "Then perhaps we can work together, a partnership. You advise my restaurant group on creating more inclusive policies. We make it public, show we're leading the industry in responding to these issues." The offer was so unexpected that Marcus almost missed the underlying strategy. Laurent wasn't offering collaboration. He was attempting co-option, trying to neutralize Marcus by absorbing him into the very system he was challenging. "Interesting pivot," Marcus observed, "but I think we both know that's not going to happen." "Then I'll see you tomorrow night," Laurent said, the threat clear in his voice. "Tomorrow night?" "The James Beard Foundation dinner. You're still planning to attend, aren't you? To accept your impact award?" Laurent's tone had turned smug. "I'll be there too. As a major donor, I'm seated at the main table, right next to the stage where you'll be speaking. Should be an interesting evening." The call ended, leaving Marcus to consider this new complication. The James Beard Foundation's annual gala was one of the industry's most prestigious events, bringing together culinary luminaries from across the country. Marcus had been chosen to receive their Impact Award months ago, long before the current controversy. He'd almost forgotten about it in the whirlwind of the past week. Now Laurent was threatening to turn it into a confrontation, a public spectacle that would overshadow the award and potentially the entire event. It was another calculated move to shift focus from the substance of Marcus's book to personal drama. Marcus immediately called Landon to discuss the situation. The publisher listened carefully to the account of Laurent's call before offering his assessment. "He's desperate," Landon concluded. "His empire is crumbling, and he's trying anything to regain control of the narrative." "Should I skip the ceremony?" Marcus asked, considering his options. "Absolutely not," Landon said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants, to chase you away from your own achievement, to make you look afraid. You attend, you accept your award with dignity, and you use the platform to reinforce the message of the movement." Marcus knew Landon was right, but he couldn't shake a sense of unease about the confrontation Laurent seemed determined to provoke. The man had nothing left to lose, which made him all the more dangerous. The morning of the James Beard Gala brought another twist. Laurent's flagship New York restaurant, Le Ciel, had failed its health inspection for the first time in its 15-year history. The timing was suspicious, suggesting someone with insider knowledge had tipped off the inspectors to specific violations. The restaurant was forced to close temporarily, a humiliating blow to Laurent's already tarnished reputation. By evening, as Marcus dressed for the gala in his hotel suite, social media was ablaze with speculation about whether Laurent would still attend given the day's developments. The restaurant mogul had been scheduled to present one of the awards, an honor that now felt highly inappropriate given the allegations against him and his businesses. Marcus adjusted his bow tie, studying his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him seemed different somehow, more confident, more resolute, carrying the weight of not just his own experiences, but those of an entire community that had found its voice through his words. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Laurent just arrived, looks like hell, clearly been drinking, watch yourself." Moments later, another text, this time from Chef Ramsay. "Foundation board had an emergency meeting, Laurent's presentation duties reassigned. He's still here but relegated to a side table. He's furious." Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself. Tonight wasn't about Laurent. It was about acknowledging the impact of the movement that had grown beyond any single individual. He would not allow Laurent's desperation to overshadow that. The lobby of the luxury hotel hosting the gala was already crowded with industry luminaries when Marcus arrived. He noticed the subtle shift as he entered. Conversations pausing, heads turning, a ripple of recognition moving through the space. But unlike at Bellamy's, where recognition had transformed dismissal into fawning respect, these gazes carried something different: admiration, solidarity, and in some cases, a hint of trepidation. Marcus had become more than a critic or author. He had become a symbol of an industry in transformation. That power brought its own kind of influence, one that couldn't be measured in reservation books or Michelin stars. As he made his way through the crowd, accepting handshakes and brief words of encouragement, Marcus finally spotted Laurent. The once imposing figure sat alone at a small table near the wall, nursing what appeared to be a tumbler of scotch. His usual entourage was noticeably absent. No sycophantic chefs, no fawning investors, no models or actors seeking proximity to power. Their eyes met across the room, Laurent's burning with barely contained rage. For a moment, Marcus thought the man might actually approach him, might create the scene he had threatened during their phone call. Instead, Laurent raised his glass in a mocking toast, his message clear: "This isn't over." Marcus turned away, refusing to engage with the petty gesture. Tonight wasn't about Laurent's wounded ego or Marcus's vindication. It was about the future, a future where no one would be made to feel they didn't belong simply because of the color of their skin or the neighborhood they came from. As the ceremony began and Marcus prepared to accept his award, he found himself thinking once again about that evening at Bellamy's, how the hostess's disdain had been replaced by shock, the manager's dismissal transformed to panic. They had been astonished to discover who he was. The true astonishment, Marcus now realized, should be that it had mattered at all, that who he was had determined how he was treated, rather than the simple fact of his humanity being enough to command basic respect and dignity. That was the real revelation, the truth at the heart of his book and the movement it had sparked. In a just world, it shouldn't matter who you are. And tonight, as he took the stage to accept his award while Laurent watched from the shadows, Marcus was one step closer to making that world a reality. The James Beard Foundation Gala had always been a celebration of culinary excellence, a night when the industry gathered to honor its brightest stars. But this year, as Marcus took his seat at the head table, he could feel the unmistakable current of change rippling through the ornate ballroom. Conversations seemed more purposeful, the usual self-congratulatory atmosphere tempered by a new awareness, a consciousness that hadn't been present in previous years. The gala's opening speeches acknowledged the elephant in the room, not by name, but through carefully worded references to recent conversations about inclusivity and the industry's ongoing evolution. The foundation's president, a veteran restaurateur named Diane Wheeler, was more direct, announcing the formation of a diversity task force to examine everything from the judging process for awards to the foundation's own hiring practices. "The culinary world is at an inflection point," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the audience. "We can either embrace change and grow stronger for it, or we can resist and become irrelevant. The foundation chooses growth." The applause that followed was genuine but uneven, pockets of enthusiastic support mixed with more hesitant acknowledgement. From his seat, Marcus could see Laurent at his isolated table, pointedly not clapping, his expression frozen in bitter contempt. Throughout the appetizer course, a delicate crudo prepared by a celebrated Filipino-American chef, Marcus found himself approached by a steady stream of industry figures eager to express their support, or in some cases, to subtly distance themselves from Laurent's camp. The politics of the evening were playing out in real time, alliances shifting as the industry's power brokers assessed which way the wind was blowing. "Your book is changing everything," murmured a well-known restaurant investor as she leaned over during a lull in the program. "I've already pulled funding from 2 of Laurent's upcoming projects. My team is reaching out to chefs of color who've been overlooked. We want to back their concepts instead." Marcus nodded appreciatively, but with a hint of caution. "It's not just about replacing one set of faces with another," he replied. "It's about reimagining the entire system. Who gets investment? Who gets reviewed? Whose cuisines are deemed worthy of high prices?" The investor nodded quickly, too quickly, before moving on to her next networking opportunity. Marcus wondered how many of these sudden conversions were genuine and how many were simply pragmatic pivots to the new reality. Real change would require more than performative allyship. It would demand sustained commitment long after the current controversy had faded from headlines. As the main course was served, a masterful fusion of Southern and Japanese influences from a chef whose Nashville restaurant had been repeatedly overlooked for major awards despite critical acclaim, Marcus found his attention drawn to the younger chefs in attendance. Unlike the established culinary stars with their carefully neutral expressions, these rising talents watched the proceedings with undisguised hope. For them, the movement Marcus had sparked represented possibility, the chance that their careers might not be constrained by the same invisible barriers that had limited their predecessors. Maya caught his eye from across the table and raised her glass in a subtle toast. They had spoken earlier that day, reflecting on how quickly things had evolved from her initial statement, supporting his account of Le Bernardin. She had received her own share of backlash, including veiled threats from Chef Michaels's remaining allies, but she had stood firm. Now, several major food publications were featuring her restaurant in prominent spreads, visibility that had been elusive despite years of exceptional cooking. The award presentations began after the main course, starting with the regional honors and moving toward the national categories. Each recipient's speech seemed to reference, either directly or obliquely, the ongoing transformation in the industry. Some embraced it wholeheartedly, using their platform to call for specific changes. Others acknowledged it more cautiously, balancing traditional expressions of gratitude with nods to listening and learning. When the time came for the Impact Award, Amara Jenkins took the stage to present it. Her selection had been a last-minute change. Laurent had originally been scheduled for this role, and her presence signified the Foundation's determination to align itself with the movement rather than resist it. The Impact Award recognizes those who use their platform to create meaningful change beyond the kitchen, Amara began, her voice steady despite the high-profile moment. This year's recipient has challenged us all to examine the unseen menus that determine who gets a seat at the table, not just in restaurants, but in the power structures of our industry. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. Through his writing, his advocacy, and his willingness to speak uncomfortable truths, he has created space for voices that have been systematically marginalized. His work reminds us that true hospitality means welcoming everyone with equal dignity and respect. The room grew utterly silent as she continued. But perhaps most importantly, he has shown us that excellence is not diminished by inclusivity, it is enhanced. That our industry is stronger when it reflects the full spectrum of culinary talent, regardless of race, gender, or background. With a warm smile, she concluded, "The James Beard Foundation's Impact Award goes to Marcus Holloway for his book, The Invisible Menu, and the movement it has inspired." The applause was immediate and overwhelming, the audience rising to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to surprise even those participating in it. As Marcus made his way to the stage, he passed Laurent's table. The restaurant mogul remained seated, his face a mask of resentment, but Marcus barely registered his presence. The momentum had shifted so definitively that Laurent now seemed like a relic of a fading era rather than a formidable opponent. Accepting the award from Amara, Marcus approached the microphone, taking a moment to survey the room. The faces looking back at him represented the full spectrum of the culinary world. The established powers, the rising stars, the influencers and critics who shaped public perception of food, all waiting to hear what he would say at this pivotal moment. "Thank you for this honor," he began simply. "When I started writing The Invisible Menu, I wasn't seeking to create a movement. I was simply documenting a reality that too many of us have experienced. The ways in which who we are determines how we're treated, even in spaces dedicated to the universal language of food." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "A week ago, I visited a restaurant called Bellamy's. When I arrived, I was treated with disdain. A black man in casual clothes, clearly not fitting their image of who belonged in their prestigious space. When my identity was revealed, everything changed. Suddenly, I was worthy of respect, of attention, of dignity." The room was absolutely still, hundreds of culinary professionals hanging on his every word. That transformation, from unwelcome to honored in the span of seconds, tells us everything we need to know about the biases embedded in our industry. The problem isn't that they didn't know who I was. The problem is that it mattered at all. Marcus shifted his gaze toward Laurent, addressing him indirectly. "Some have suggested that this movement is about revenge or resentment. It's not. It's about recognition. recognizing talent wherever it exists, recognizing bias where it persists, and recognizing our collective responsibility to create an industry that lives up to its highest ideals. Returning his attention to the broader audience, Marcus continued with increasing passion. The beautiful truth about food is that it has always been a fusion of cultures, a dialogue across differences, a celebration of diversity. The ugly lie we've told ourselves is that only certain people deserve to be the official interpreters of that dialogue, the recognized masters of that fusion, the celebrated voices of that diversity. He lifted the award slightly. This recognition means a great deal to me, but my sincere hope is that very soon it won't be necessary to honor someone for simply pointing out what should have been obvious all along, that in the world of food, as in the world at large, excellence comes in all colors, speaks with all accents, and emerges from all backgrounds. The audience rose again as Marcus concluded, the applause thunderous and sustained. Even those who had been tepid in their support earlier seemed caught up in the moment, the undeniable moral clarity of Marcus's message transcending political calculations. As Marcus returned to his seat, he noticed that Laurent's chair was empty. The restaurant mogul had slipped out during the speech, unable or unwilling to witness the industry's embrace of the very values he had spent his career resisting. The remainder of the ceremony passed in something of a blur for Marcus, his focus narrowing to the conversations happening around him, the connections being formed, the possibilities being imagined. Chefs of color were exchanging information with investors eager to diversify their portfolios. Established culinary stars were seeking out younger talents they might have overlooked in the past. Food writers were discussing how to approach reviews more equitably, how to recognize their own biases in evaluating restaurants. It was the beginning of something, not yet the transformation itself, but the essential prerequisite, the collective acknowledgement that change was necessary and overdue. As the formal ceremony concluded and guests moved to the reception area for dessert and networking, Marcus found himself approached by Diane Wheeler, the foundation's president. "That was a remarkable speech," she said, her expression earnest. "We'd like to invite you to join our diversity task force, not just as a member but as co-chair. Your perspective would be invaluable as we rethink our approach." Marcus considered the offer carefully. The foundation had significant influence in the culinary world, and a leadership role would provide a platform to implement real changes. But there were also risks of co-option, of the movement being institutionalized in ways that blunted its impact, of Marcus himself becoming part of the very establishment he had challenged. "I'm honored by the invitation," he replied diplomatically. "Let me think about it and get back to you. I'd want to be sure that the task force has real authority to make substantive changes, not just cosmetic ones." Wheeler nodded, understanding the implicit challenge. "Fair enough. The board is serious about this, Marcus. What's happening in our industry? It's long overdue. We want to be part of the solution." As she moved on to greet other guests, Marcus was joined by Maya and Amara, both glowing with the energy of the evening. "Your speech," Maya said, shaking her head in admiration. "Not a dry eye in the house, well, except for Laurent and his few remaining loyalists." "Speaking of whom," Amara added, lowering her voice, "he didn't just leave. He was escorted out. Apparently, he tried to approach the stage during your speech. Security intercepted him. He was not in a good state." Marcus absorbed this information with a mixture of concern and resignation. Laurent's fall was of his own making, the inevitable consequence of resisting change rather than embracing it. Still, there was no satisfaction in watching someone self-destruct, regardless of their past actions. "This was never about Laurent," Marcus reminded them. "He's just one symptom of a much larger problem." A problem we're finally addressing, Maya noted, her expression hopeful. I've had 3 different investors approach me tonight about expanding my restaurant group, people who wouldn't have given me the time of day a month ago. Same, Amara confirmed. Plus an offer to develop a cooking show focused on Caribbean cuisine, not as exotic food, but as a serious culinary tradition with depth and complexity. Their experiences confirmed what Marcus had observed throughout the evening. The landscape was shifting, opportunities opening up that had previously been tightly guarded and selectively distributed. It wasn't yet the comprehensive transformation he envisioned, but it was an unmistakable start. As the gala began to wind down, Marcus found a quiet moment to step outside onto the hotel's terrace, needing a brief respite from the intensity of the evening. The New York skyline sparkled before him, a constellation of lights against the dark canvas of night. His phone buzzed with a notification, a breaking news alert from a major outlet. Laurent Hospitality Group Board calls emergency meeting amid reports of CEO's erratic behavior. The endgame was approaching, but Marcus knew that Laurent's personal downfall was merely a chapter in the larger story, not its conclusion. The real work, the sustained day-by-day effort of reimagining and rebuilding the culinary world, was just beginning. As he gazed out at the city, Marcus felt a profound sense of both accomplishment and responsibility. The movement he had helped catalyze had already exceeded his expectations, creating ripples that extended far beyond his book or his personal experiences. Now came the crucial challenge, ensuring that this moment of awakening translated into lasting structural change. His phone buzzed again, a message from Landon. Early numbers are in. The book is officially #1 on the Times list. This is just the beginning. Marcus smiled, tucking the phone away and taking one more moment to himself before returning to the celebration. Landon was right. It was just the beginning. But for the first time in his career, Marcus believed that the end, a truly equitable culinary world where everyone belonged, was actually possible. Not guaranteed, not inevitable, but genuinely possible. And that possibility made all the difference. 6 months after the James Beard Gala, Marcus stood outside the entrance to Bellamy's, experiencing an uncanny sense of déjà vu. The restaurant looked the same. The elegant facade, the subtle lighting, the air of exclusivity. But much had changed, both in the culinary world and in Marcus's own life. "Ready?" Elise asked, standing beside him. She had accompanied him tonight not as his publisher's representative, but as a friend, a witness to the journey that had transformed both of their lives over the past half-year. Marcus nodded, adjusting his leather jacket, the same one he'd worn on his first visit. "As ready as I'll ever be." They entered together, approaching the familiar hostess stand. But Jessica, the woman who had tried to turn Marcus away 6 months ago, was gone. In her place stood a young black woman with a warm smile and an air of quiet competence. "Good evening," she greeted them. "Welcome to Bellamy's. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "Holloway, table for 2 at 8 p.m. The hostess checked her system, her expression professional and welcoming. "Of course, Mr. Holloway. Your table is ready. Please follow me." As they moved through the dining room, Marcus took note of the subtle but significant changes. The clientele was more diverse than before, though still predominantly white and affluent. The staff, however, had undergone a more dramatic transformation. Faces of various ethnicities now visible both on the floor and through the open kitchen door. Their table was not in the corner by the kitchen, but in the center of the dining room, a prime location with an excellent view of the entire restaurant. The hostess seated them with practiced efficiency, handing them menus with a genuine smile. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said. "Enjoy your evening." As she walked away, Elise leaned forward. Well, that was different. Marcus nodded, taking in the atmosphere. The question is whether it's different because they recognize me or because things have actually changed. Probably both, Elise admitted. But even that's progress, isn't it? Before Marcus could respond, a familiar figure approached their table. Richard Gaines, the general manager who had reluctantly seated Marcus during his first visit. His demeanor was transformed, his previous haughtiness replaced by what appeared to be genuine humility. "Mr. Holloway," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to have you back at Bellamy's. I hope we can provide you with a more appropriate experience than your last visit." Marcus shook his hand, studying the man's face for any sign of insincerity. "Thank you, Mr. Gaines. I appreciate the welcome." Gaines hesitated, clearly wrestling with something. "If you'll permit me, I'd like to apologize personally for how you were treated on your previous visit. It was inexcusable and reflected biases that had no place in our establishment, or any establishment." The apology seemed genuine, which surprised Marcus. "Thank you," he said simply. "Since your book was published, we've undergone significant changes," Gaines continued. "Diversity training for all staff, revisions to our seating policies, and most importantly, a complete overhaul of our hiring practices." He gestured discreetly toward the diverse staff members visible throughout the restaurant. "We're still learning, still growing, but we're committed to being part of the solution." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the effort while reserving final judgment. "I'm glad to hear it. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. Chef Ramsey asked me to let you know he'll be out to greet you shortly," Gaines added. "He's finishing a new dish he's particularly excited about, inspired by your book, actually." As Gaines departed, Marcus and Elise exchanged looks of cautious optimism. The changes at Bellamy's were promising, but both knew that surface-level diversity didn't always translate to deeper structural transformation. Their server arrived, a Latino man who introduced himself as Miguel, and proceeded to guide them through the menu with knowledge and enthusiasm. The wine list was presented without assumption, the recommendations offered with respect rather than condescension. It was, in every way, the service that should be standard for all guests, but had historically been reserved for those deemed important enough to deserve it. Chef Ramsey emerged from the kitchen midway through their appetizers, his face breaking into a genuine smile at the sight of Marcus. Unlike their last encounter, there was no boisterous public announcement of Marcus's identity, just a warm greeting between colleagues who had found themselves on the same side of a pivotal industry shift. "The book changed everything," Ramsey said as he pulled up a chair at Marcus's invitation. "Not just here, but everywhere. You know Laurent's officially out, right? The board finally forced him to resign last week." Marcus nodded. He'd seen the news. Laurent's final, humiliating exit from the empire he'd built, accelerated by reports of erratic behavior and plummeting revenues across his restaurant portfolio. There was no satisfaction in another man's downfall, but there was a certain poetic justice in Laurent being undone by the very biases he had defended so vigorously. "What happens to his restaurants?" Elise asked. "Being restructured," Ramsey replied. "The board has brought in new leadership, including, surprisingly enough, Maya Daniels as culinary director for the entire group. She's implementing changes across all properties, equal pay policies, transparent promotion tracks, the works." This was news to Marcus, and welcome news at that. Maya hadn't mentioned the offer during their last conversation, but it made perfect sense. Her combination of culinary excellence and unwavering principles made her ideal for guiding the former Laurent empire toward a more equitable future. "And here?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about Bellamy's transformation. Ramsey sighed, his expression turning more serious. "It hasn't been easy. We lost some regulars who preferred the old way of doing things, but we've gained new ones who appreciate what we're trying to build. The staff is happier, more invested. The food is better, more diverse influences, more creative energy. He smiled ruefully. Turns out hiring people from different backgrounds actually improves a restaurant. Who knew? The self-deprecating joke acknowledged the absurdity of the industry's previous resistance to diversity, the persistent myth that excellence was somehow compromised by inclusivity, when in reality, the opposite was true. As their conversation continued through dinner, Marcus found himself reflecting on the 6 months since his book's publication. The movement it had sparked had evolved in ways he couldn't have predicted, extending far beyond fine dining to influence everything from culinary education to food media to the venture capital that funded new restaurant concepts. The James Beard Foundation's Diversity Task Force, which Marcus had ultimately agreed to co-chair, had implemented sweeping changes to its award criteria and judging panels. The foundation was now actively highlighting cuisines and chefs that had been historically overlooked, not as token gestures, but as a fundamental reframing of what constituted culinary excellence. Major food publications had revised their review policies, acknowledging the biases that had led critics to lavish attention on European and white-owned establishments, while treating restaurants serving cuisines from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean as ethnic discoveries, rather than serious culinary contenders. Some had hired their first critics of color, others had instituted blind evaluations to minimize unconscious bias. Investment patterns were shifting too. Amara's Roots and Soul had secured funding for 3 new locations, including one in a prestigious downtown space previously occupied by one of Laurent's overpriced steakhouses. David Chen's Jade Garden had expanded to New York, bringing his innovative approach to Chinese cuisine to a market that had long relegated it to the category of takeout rather than fine dining. These were all positive developments, signs that the movement had taken root in ways that would outlast the initial controversy, but Marcus knew that real change wasn't measured in months but in years, in the slow, persistent work of dismantling systems built over generations. As they finished their meal, which had been exceptional, the service impeccable throughout, Marcus couldn't help but compare it to his previous experience at Bellamy's. The stark contrast between being dismissed and being welcomed, between being seen as an intruder and being recognized as a valued guest, encapsulated everything his book had sought to address. When the check arrived, Marcus reached for it, but Miguel shook his head. "Chef Ramsay has taken care of it, sir. He said to tell you it's an honor to have you dining with us." Marcus thanked him but left a generous tip anyway, recognizing that the real work of the restaurant happened not just in the spotlight of the kitchen but in the often invisible labor of the entire staff. As they prepared to leave, Gaines approached once more. "Mr. Holloway, before you go, there's someone who would like to speak with you." He gestured toward a young black man in kitchen whites, nervously waiting nearby. "Our new sous chef, Terrell Williams. He specifically asked if he could meet you." The young chef stepped forward, extending his hand with a mixture of confidence and reverence. "Mr. Holloway, I just wanted to thank you. Your book had changed my life. I was ready to quit cooking altogether before I read it. Now I'm here at Bellamy's." His voice filled with quiet pride. "First black sous chef in the restaurant's history." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "The talent was always yours, Terrell. All I did was help create space for it to be recognized." "Still," Terrell insisted, "knowing you went through similar struggles and kept going, it made all the difference. You showed us it was possible." As Marcus and Elise stepped out into the cool night air, his phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Landon with a link to a just-published article in the New York Times. 1 year after The Invisible Menu, how Marcus Holloway's bestseller is reshaping American dining. "Will you look at that?" Elise said, reading over his shoulder. "They're calling it a watershed moment in culinary history." Marcus smiled, tucking his phone away. The headline was flattering, but he knew the real story was more complex, a collective awakening that had been building for years, catalyzed by his book, but sustained by countless individuals making daily choices to demand and create change. "What's next?" Elise asked as they walked toward the car. "Another book? A documentary? Everyone's wondering what Marcus Holloway does for an encore." Marcus considered the question, looking back at Bellamy's illuminated entrance. The restaurant that had once tried to turn him away now served as a symbol of what was possible when exclusion gave way to genuine inclusion. "What's next is making sure this isn't just a moment," he replied. "Movements fade, hashtags get replaced. The real work is ensuring that a year from now, 5 years from now, a decade from now, a young chef like Terrell doesn't need a best-selling book to have his talent recognized. He just needs his talent." They reached the car, but Marcus paused before getting in, his gaze sweeping across the city sprawling before them, a landscape of restaurants and kitchens where the same story played out night after night, some still clinging to old hierarchies, others embracing a new vision of belonging. "You know what the most remarkable thing is," he said quietly. "When I came to Bellamy's that first night, they were astonished to discover who I was, as if my identity was the only thing that made me worthy of respect. Tonight they weren't astonished at all, they were simply hospitable, to me, to everyone." "Isn't that how it should be?" Elise asked. Marcus nodded, opening the car door. "That's exactly how it should be, and someday it will be everywhere. Not because people would recognize Marcus Holloway or anyone else by name or reputation, but because they would recognize the fundamental truth that had driven him from the beginning. That dignity wasn't something to be earned through status or achievement, but a basic right belonging to everyone who walked through the door. That was the real revolution. Not astonishment at discovering who someone was, but the simple, profound recognition of their humanity from the very first moment. And as the car pulled away from Bellamy's, carrying him toward whatever challenge awaited next, Marcus knew that revolution was only just beginning.